Right, so the full deck list for the Jarl Vetreiđi Armory deck has been released. So, why don't we take a look at what's included in the box. Now, starting off, here are all the cards included in the Jarl's Armory deck. Now, they all do come at full playsets, right? So 3 ofs for all the in-deck cards, and 1 ofs for the equipment pieces. So you can pick up the Jarl Armory deck, and you can transition it over to Stravo or Oldhim. No worries there, right? You don't have to go fetch yourself an odd copy of X card here or there, right? Which is always wonderful to see whenever we're dealing with new cards in a alternative product. But there are a few different ways that we can look and break down the deck, starting off by rarity. So, Legendary. The included Legendary is, of course, the Gauntlets of Boreal Domain. A very nice, impactful effect that really ties into the Jarl's core mechanic of Mangle. So, quick refresher, once per turn action, right? Pay 2. If you pitch an Earth card, all your Mangles get +2. If you pitch an Ice card this way, all your Mangles get Dominate for the turn. It has Temper, and starting off with 2 initial block, right? So, very, very nice card for the Armory deck, but it's not necessarily a must-have for Elemental Guardian, right? So it does work in Oldhim, it does work in Stravo, and I could definitely see them including it, picking up Mangle, picking up the Armor Disruption packages, but it's not a must-have for Guardian across the board, which I think is the perfect way to handle a Legendary in a 2-print product, right? So kudos to LSS for its design. It has a Legendary level of power, but not necessarily a Legendary level of demand. Now, on to the Majestic. So, I'm sure I'm not the only one who was bamboozled by it, but the Jarl himself does count as one of the 23 Majestics listed for the deck, right? A little bit unfortunate, but hey, we still get 22, right? It's still a wide variety of Majestics, both new and old, and altogether it's still a nice looking deck. So, Majestic-wise, we have the Jarl, we have Summit, his weapon, the Olin Ice Cap, Tectonic Crust, and Root-Bound Trunks for his equipment. Then, for the in-deck cards, we have Mangle, Unforgetting, Unforgiving, Frozen to Death, Exposed to the Elements, which is a wonderful inclusion, I think, right? Not necessarily at 3 elves, but still it fits the core themes and mechanics of the Jarl's deck, right? It's a little bit more of arm disruption. It leans into the earth side of things, which is kind of where the deck sort of lacks a little bit, right? There's not a whole lot of earth synergy going on, but what there is still decent, right? You've got Tectonic Crust, you've got Exposed to the Elements, and then you have a Strength of Sequoia, right, as the Earth side of things. Then for the Majestics, we also have Primal to Eternity and Channel Mount Ison. So, right, a decent set of new and old, by which way there are, of course, a lot more new than there is old. Then, for the rares and common. Now, unfortunately, no Majestic Shield, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of us were half expecting a Majestic Shield, a Majestic Earth Shield, even to help round out the Earth side of the deck. But nonetheless, we got a Steel Braid Buckler. Yeah. Well, it'll do its job, right? You can use it up and then really lean into Summit's keyword heavy. So it is a nice inclusion, and it's a very, very easy upgrade to Stalagmite, right? It's same block, just with an actual effect on it. So decent, solid inclusion. Nothing to sort of figure out and think about whether or not it's better. So yeah, it is what it is, right? I was hoping for an Earth Shield, just because it would lean itself towards a few different developments across all Elemental Guardians, right? Terra, if you play Blitz, and then Stravo and Oldhim with Decompose and those subset of cards. But nonetheless, Steel Braid Buckler it is. The other rare included is Earthform. And then for the commons, we have Buckling Blow, Snow Under, Icy Encounter, Emerging Avalanche, Strength of Sequoia, Glacial Footsteps, Strong Yield, Sigil of Earth, Autumn's Touch, Winter's Grasp, Polar Blast, Winter's Bite, and curiously, a set of Amulets of Ice, right? So there's definitely some easy to cut cards, or upgrade, if you will, right? But we'll get to that in a bit. There are a few different ways that I do want to look at the deck and start breaking it down. So, starting off, we can break it down by its pitch curve. So, there are 18 red cards in total and 42 blue. So, I do think LSS have leaned in pretty conservatively into its pitch curve, right? Basically, they like setting up decks to always hit, regardless of what they set up, right? So, there is a decent amount of ice and earth for your mechanics there, and of course there's a hefty blue backbone leading into whatever you want to do on your turns, be it swinging with your 6-cost weapon, setting up an aura, and then going into a normal attack. You're covered, right? You should basically never have a bricked hand in terms of pitch, so that is nice to see. For the red cards, we have 15 attack actions and 3 block, right? So we've got Mangle, Buckling Blow, Snow Under, Earthform, and Icy Encounter. You're probably leading with your Earthforms, Mangle, and Buckling Blows, saving your snow unders and your ice encounters. Ice encounter, predominantly, right, you want to open up some of your opponent's equipment so that you can double dip with its frostbite effect, thanks to the Jarl's ability. And then, of course, you have Unforgetting, Unforgiving as your Mangle Surge, but that does require you still to set up counters on your opponent's equipment, right? So that's definitely worth noting. It's not just a instant play as soon as you draw it, right? Get its block value. You do need the counter equipment, right? So if you destroy equipment with counters, you need to find some new counters. If your opponent doesn't set up counters, right? There's a lot of thought put into how exactly to juggle counters on the board now for equipment, which is definitely an interesting design route. And then for the blue cards, we have 9 attack actions. So these are pretty much your late game attack actions. You're going to cycle them away, save them for a little bit. You have Winter's Grasp, again, to synergize with the Jarl's ability. You have Glacial Footsteps as a late game dominate, right? Potentially chip away at the last remaining life of your opponent. And then Autumn's Touch as just a little bit of Earth Synergy. It's 3 block, it's pitchable, it's solid, right? Just not super exciting without a little bit more Earth Synergy to me. Then for the auras, we have 9 utility auras. So Crumble to Eternity will help set up counters. Channel Mount Ison will sort of chip away at your opponent's life once you get your Frostbite rolling. And then Sigil of Earth will help you set up future block. Then we have our buff auras by way of Strength of Sequoia, Strong Yield, and Emerging Avalanche. Emerging Avalanche will help you set up Frostbite. Strength of Sequoia will help you set up Seismic Surge. And Strong Yield is just there as another Earth inclusion. We then have some utility actions by way of Polar Blast, a chance to give your attacks dominate. Frozen Death, more equipment disruption. Winter's Bite, right, some discard and Frostbite generation. Again, all these cards, once you have Jarl set up, they will generate Frostbite. Then we have 3 instants, again, by way of Exposed to the Elements, and 3 items by way of Amulet of Ice. So all around, again, a nice solid pitch curve, and the deck's definitely looking like it's pretty easy to play out of the box. So from there, we can take a look at your attack actions and your non-attack actions, basically what you're trying to set up and do every other turn, every turn, right? So there are 24 attack actions overall. Your Mangles, Buckling Blows, your Snow Unders, right, your Ice Encounters, your Winter's Grasp, your Earth Form, your Autumn's Touch, and your Glacial Footsteps, right? You're definitely leading with your Buckling Blows, your Earth Form, setting up those counters, going into your Mangles, going into your Snow Under, saving your Blues for last. So all around, it is a solid set of attacks, but you could probably swap some of these out for some more impactful cards. And then for the non-attack actions, there's 30, along with 6 other cards by way of 3 block and 3 instants. So again, there are 18 auras in total, right? So that will synergize with your Root-bound Trunks. At 18, I think you're pretty spoiled for choice as to when exactly you want to pop the Root-bound Trunks. So you can definitely utilize it pretty effectively to set up its maximum block and make it sort of competitive with the block values of Civic Steps. Then we have 9 actions, all of which are Frost, right? So again, once you have your opponent's equipment exposed, you can use them to generate Frostbite as well as somewhat of a substantial effect, which I suppose does also go for the Amulets of Ice, right? They will generate Frostbite, and they are okay, right, in terms of ice fusing and then activating their instant effect. But altogether, at 30 non-attack actions, you will benefit pretty highly from embodiments of Earth. Not that there are many ways to generate. You've got your 3 Earth Forms and your Root-bound Trunks, but still a solid boost. You will have a pretty easy time having non-attack actions to block with, right, and setting up some auras to then go into your attack actions. The core mechanic is definitely aim for some of those reds, cycle away your blues by swinging, right, and basically every turn you should have something proper to do that will get you value out of the deck. From there, we can look at a few token interactions. So, Seismic Surge targets, right? There's only 12 in the deck. Your Seismic Surge is generated through your Tectonic Crust and your Strength of Sequoia. Now, Tectonic Crust is definitely a lot more valuable, right? It's on board. You can use it in conjunction with your gloves. You can use it in conjunction with your boots. And the fact that through that, you can more easily control when you will get your Seismic Surge definitely gets you better payoff, right? So Mangle and Buckling Blow are usually your primary Seismic Surge targets, but the thing about Mangle is, of course, you have the Legendary Gauntlets. So generally speaking, it's not 4, it's actually 6, right? So 1 Seismic Surge is only going to bring that down to 5 instead of 3, meaning that you're still going to need 2 cards to pitch. It does smooth over, setting up an aura, going into a Mangle, but generally speaking, you don't need the Seismic Surge for Mangle. Again, the overall pitch curve of the deck is very conservative in blue. So with that said, Buckling Blow still does benefit from a Seismic Surge generation, right? Pushing it down to 3 cost makes it a lot easier to get off while still maintaining decent block value on your opponent's turn. Snow Under is a bit more interesting, right? Because if you can time Tectonic Crust with your Strength of Sequoia, right? Get possibly 2 Seismic Surge going. That and Glacial Footsteps do become a little bit more lucrative, especially Snow Under with its cost to attack ratio and the potential to generate Frostbite. Now, in the case of Glacial Footsteps, I do think you are just waiting till the end. So you are pretty much going to be spent on your Tectonic Crust and probably your Strength of Sequoia, in which case it being a 6 cost with Dominate is not the end of the world, right? If you can get it off. It is a little bit awkward with its fuse, of course, because you will most likely need a full hand in order to maximize its usage, but still solid nonetheless. So then in terms of Frostbite generation, which I think is a pretty solid engine in the Jarl, right? There are 24 different ways to generate Frostbite and of course channel Mount Ison to capitalize on it. So once you do start opening up your opponent's equipment, you can really take advantage of the Jarl's ability and probably end most turns with at least 1 to 2 Frostbite in play, right, to help impede your opponent. So that's definitely good to see. I do think chipping away with Channel Mount Isons will be a very powerful late game mechanic because it gets around damage prevention. So overall, right, solid. I don't think Seismic Surge, though, does play a very important role in the deck, right, which then opens up Strength of Sequoia and Tectonic Crust, both to be swapped out to something else. But from there, we can take a look at the elemental side of things. So there are 18 elemental actions in total in the deck, 12 of which are Ice Fusion, 3 have Dual Fusion, and 3 have Earth Fusion. So you are definitely in Ice, right? But don't worry, there are plenty of cards to reveal. You have 18 Ice cards overall, you have 3 dual Ice Earth cards, and you have 12 Earth cards. So technically speaking, right, you could definitely lean more into Earth with the Jarl, right? I would like to see, some sort of decompose to take advantage of the number of Earth cards included, but you should be able to always land your Strength of Sequoia as well as your Tectonic Crust, with Strength being able to cycle around, right? You can pitch it for its value and save it for later, but generally speaking, again, LSS are leaning into their no-miss mentality. You will generally have all the cards you need when you most likely need them. But in saying that, right, anytime a deck is built this conservatively, that does mean you are open to slight tweaks and changes. Then the last thing to look at is the main bread and butter of the Jarl, and that is equipment disruption and, of course, your own equipment interaction. So overall, there are 15 different ways to disrupt your opponent's equipment, right? Counter generation, thanks to Buckling Blow and Crumble to Eternity, and then dual use through Exposed to the Elements. Again, depending on how you fuse it with Earth, you get some counter generation. Fuse it with Ice, you get the potential to destroy your opponent's equipment. And then Mangle and Frozen to Death for your actual equipment destruction effects. So it's a solid amount, but I do think it could be a little bit greater, right? You can definitely help chip through your opponent's equipment, but depending on the matchup, depending on the equipment that they present, you might run into a little bit of difficulty, right? You do need some cards to line up. Obviously, you need the counter generation before you actually go into the destruction effects, but I do think that is sort of where your weapon gets you out of hot water, right? Being able to swing decently with it instead of, utilizing a early drawn Mangle is probably a valid choice. Now, there is also Unforgetting Unforgiving. Again, it does need the counter in order for you to actually search out a Mangle. So that is something worth considering, right? When you do actually go to destroy your opponent's equipment, whether or not you have the next counter already set up or they're going to be forced to set up an additional counter. And then in terms of the equipment interaction, I have excluded the equipment disruption cards because generally speaking, I'm pretty sure you really want to play them, right? They're your impactful mechanic. They're what you want to trigger the Jarl's hero ability. So for the equipment interactions, the All-in Ice Cap has 16 valid choices, so you should be able to draw into them nice and early, right? And utilize it effectively. Again, Rootbound Trunks has 15, so you're spoiled for choice. And at 1 and 4, you're probably going to be able to save that for a more opportune moment. Same with Tectonic Crust. The nice impactful part about the All-in Ice Cap and Tectonic Crust is both can be utilized with the Gauntlets, and then Tectonic Crust can also be utilized with the Rootbound Trunks, right? So the fact that both their effects are easily triggerable with all onboard cards is definitely nice. Again, setting up Seismic Surge precisely when you want, or a Frostbite by way of the All-in Ice Cap can help you end off a opponent's turn early, right? By just gumming them up with that one extra cost. So again, altogether, there is a decent amount of choice when utilizing these equipment pieces, right? So again, leaning into LSS's never miss design for Armory decks. So then lastly, that just leads us to the tweaks and changes you can make to the deck. Now, I am by no means a competitive player, right? I do combo fun. So do take my input and suggestions with a little bit of grain of salt, but I do think the easy upgrades are by far just the easiest changes to the deck, and they do make the most sense to me, right? So we have Snow Under being converted to Oaken Olds. I think that's pretty much no-brainer. They are essentially the same card, right? But Oaken Old has a much more impactful effect. Granted, you do need the Earth Fusion as well, but as we've seen through the deck list, there is quite a number of both Ice and Earth cards, so I'm pretty sure you'll be able to land the Oaken Old when you want to, or at least pitch stack it away and set it up for the future. Then, Expose to the Elements, right? While it is a impactful instant card, it is not a guarantee, right? Its equipment destruction effect is not a guarantee, and in some sense is easier for your opponent to get around, right, than negating a on-hit effect. So I do think you don't need all 3 copies, and converting one of those copies to a Pulse of Ice and Loft definitely seems like a no-brainer, right? Pulse of Ice and Loft is a Ice Earth card, so it helps satisfy some of your fuse mechanics, and overall is a very nice defensive card for Elemental Guardian. And then lastly, we have our Amulets of Ice being converted to Buckles, right? So Buckles are really nice. They combine well with Buckling Blow to have a solid effect of both setting up counters and then a destruction effect on hit. It will also help push that damage slightly higher to try and land that crush effect. So yeah, overall, those 3 changes are changes I'm pretty sure most people can get behind. Then we have the equipment upgrade. So Steel Braid Buckler to a Stalagmite is, again, a sort of no-brainer, right? It's the same exact card, except with Frostbite Generation, same block value, just with Frostbite Generation. So yeah, that's definitely an easy choice. The Olin Ice Cap. I would very much like the Olin Ice Cap a little bit more if it had 2 block, but at only 1 block, yes, the Frostbite could come in handy depending on the matchup, but you probably want something a little bit more meta-relevant. You definitely need Arcane Barrier, right? Damage Prevention, Arcane Barrier are sorely lacking for the deck given the current meta, right? So All-in Ice Cap to Skull Cap, Providence, or Balance of Justice seem like another easy choice for me, right? Tectonic Crust, switching over to Tectonic Plating for more consistent Seismic Surge generation. Again, the curve of the deck is pretty conservative, so it doesn't seem that hard to set up the resources to utilize Tectonic Plating. Plus, you know, in a pinch, it can help you cycle away some of those red cards if you want to save them for later, right? Or Heart of Ice. Again, it has a nice disruption effect, again, with the resource curve of the deck, and then it also has Arcane Barrier for the current meta, and then just Norrune Boots as a easy sideboard suggestion. Again, you will need Arcane Barrier. Then for further tweaking, this is where this is more subjective, right? My thoughts and feelings versus what is probably more optimal. But Amulet of Ice to Insidious Chill, if you want to sort of maintain the essence of the deck that LSS are setting up, I think that's a solid choice. Insidious Chill is basically Amulet of Ice with 2 extra charges. So they both do the same thing when you Ice Fuse. Amulet of Ice, though, you get to activate. Insidious Chill auto procs. Insidious Chill also opens up the inclusion of some Emboldens, right? Insidious Chill will stick around, take Emboldened Blue, and then be able to set that up so you can utilize it, draw a card, and then effectively reduce its cost from 4 to 1 and get a more sizable boost from an aura. But generally speaking, I would just cut the Amulets of Ice for a considerably better card, right? Heck, use Buckle, use Oakenold, just, yeah, probably swap out the Amulets of Ice. Strength of Sequoia, again, I don't think the Seismic Surge from it is that valid. In fact, I think Dominate is significantly better with what you're trying to land. So Emerging Dominance or your attack next turn dominates with still the same buff as Strength Sequoia, I think is a easy no-brainer. And then we have the Earth and Ice package. Now, if you maintain the Earth cards of the deck, definitely taking Felling of the Crown and Plow Under and some of the other Earth synergy cards is a very valid choice, right? Again, there is a solid backbone, 12 cards plus the equipment pieces to utilize. So making use of a couple decomposed cards is definitely something you can set up. Plow Under, you'll be able to cycle around a little bit, and then Felling of the Crown, I think you can definitely slot in early, probably replacing the Icy Encounter and the Winter's Grasp with those 2 cards. Or if you want to take out the Earth and stick with your Ice, right, I think Autumn's Touch into a blue Buckling Blow is a solid choice. Again, set up a little bit more counter generation, or just cycle it around, still 3 block. Combo it again with Buckle, right? You could probably take the Buckle instead of Strong Yield. Again, there's plenty of auras for your boots, and you definitely don't need that many Earth cards for just Strength of Sequoia, right? Especially if you take it out for Emerging Dominance or the chess piece. So I do think those are valid considerations, right? You don't need the Earth package included if you're going to get rid of the Tectonic Crust and Strength of Sequoia, right? So you can definitely take a harder line in Ice or Equipment Disruption or just general good Guardian cards, mainly D-Reacts and some damage prevention are definitely needed for the deck. Or if you do want to lean into the earth, right, you can cut out a little bit of the ice. But I think they'll do it, right? So yeah, there we go. My thoughts and opinions on everything included in the Jarl's Armory deck, right? So let me know what you think of my tweaks, and let me know if you got better ones. Again, not a super competitive player, right? So feel free to fault me and correct me, right? Nonetheless, hope you enjoyed. See ya.